Upgrade your shit.
Yo, welcome to the Upgrade Guys, Upgrade Your Shit podcast. This is Coach RG3.
And I am now the what?
And we are the Upgrade Guys. So, welcome to our first episode. We are happy to have you here. And we're looking forward to jumping this off. And before we get started, though, we just want to say you can find us on Instagram at theupgradeguys.com. You can find us on YouTube at The Upgrade Guys, Facebook, The Upgrade Guys. It's all the same. We've got a lot of content out there, and you can definitely check out our website at The Upgrade Guys. Don't put that www shit in there. It ain't going to work. Before we get started today, I know a lot of people want to know about our backgrounds and stuff like that, but we're going to save that for a later date. We want to just jump right in and get started with some conversation about mobility, which is something that we spend a lot of time working in the realm of. And that doesn't mean that that's all we do. Nat does BJJ. He lifts, cycles. He does all types of stuff. I lift, run, animal flow, steel mace work. I do all types of other stuff as well. I got kids. We both got kids. So, we're both over 40. So, if you see the stuff that we're doing and we enjoy the time we spend with our children, and we want to continue to do that. So that's why we spend a lot of time working on our mobility. But I wanted to jump in because Nat posted a interesting piece recently that said, what did it say exactly? Split squats won't earn mobility. And that jumped off on social media.
Ooh, they was mad.
Yeah, they had some issues with that.
It was big mad.
So we wanted to jump right into that and discuss it a little bit and flesh it out a little bit more thoroughly without all the interruptions and bullshit. We're just gonna feed you. We're just gonna feed you 100% grade A beef thought process. And we be having beef.
Kick it off.
All right. So one of the first things he said was you can only move where you can move. What exactly did you mean by that?
So I think it's Chivers or Dre, but we always hear Chivers and Dre talk about it. Dr. Andre Ospina, Dr. Michael Chivers, the founders of the functional range systems. But all that means is you can only move where you can move. And that should make a bunch of sense to people. If I'm talking about my ankle specifically, I can only move my ankle as far as it can be moved. And that's so no matter what you do, your ankle is going to be moved where it can be moved unless you take a specific approach to change how much it can move. Because if you don't do that, you can't be sure that you're expanding your ability to move that ankle. If anything, you're just throwing shit at a wall to see if it'll stick. And then if your ankle moves, you're gonna be like, oh, well, I gained mobility. When in all reality, if you're taking a larger approach, like doing an exercise to approach one joint to be able to move, you're not expanding the capacity of that joint, and you likely didn't check its potential to move in the first place or how much of it you could control. You were just saying, hey, when I do this movement, how much is my ankle move? And then as I do it, if my ankle moves more, then I gained ankle mobility. That's not what the fuck happened.
So, I think to make it a little bit less complex for people out there listening, I think one of the things I posted recently had talked about global versus local activities, right? And I think this kind of is a good way to kind of paint that picture. When you think about things that happen in let's take the United States for example. We want to change something in one place in the United States, right? That may be there's 50 states, right? There's tons of cities. Let's say we wanted to change something in San Francisco, which is where we're at. Do we look to the federal government to make that change in San Francisco? That I don't think that's specific enough. Now, can the federal government play a part in the changes that happen in San Francisco? Yes, because there's feedback, right? There's stuff, there's communication and there's feedback, but it has to go through the state level, and then it has to go, it has to go through these processes. But if we want more immediate change to happen, we've got to do it at the specific local level. And so if you take, for example, LGBTQ rights, the right to have same-sex marriage, for example, we made that happen in San Francisco itself, right? That we didn't wait for the nation to make a decision in order for that to happen. We worked specifically in this space to do that, to make that change. And these are universal principles. Although it's like we're talking about a human body, we're like all the principles in which we kind of create society are all kind of related. Like it all seems to be the same structural like creations, whether it be business, whether it be the way we lay out our cities, whether it be anatomical, like all of these things seem to kind of have or share the same principles. So hopefully that kind of clears like the thought process up. But I mean, what do you like as far as what's the thought process behind moving into like as we move into specificity and dynamic systems, like how do these things all integrate together? Because obviously, we still got to do like if split squat is something you want to do, you still got to do it, right?
I agree. So it's not that the split squat is a bad exercise. It's what's your intention for doing it, and how is that tool best used? That tool is not best used, or it's not the choice to gain ankle mobility or any other kind of mobility. You can train the mobility that you have doing that, but you can't get the mobility by doing that. And when we're talking about dynamic systems and specificity, it explains that, like, if you think about dynamic systems, like, nothing happens the same twice in our body when we do a movement. And that's because the brain will take in, like, what can I use when I want to do something? And then it will use whatever it's comfortable with because it's lazy. And it doesn't want to expend extra stuff to make things happen. It wants to be efficient. So because of that, if your ankle doesn't move and then you try to use all the other stuff to make it move, if we try to use all the other stuff to make that ankle move, you're not making it easier for that brain adaptation, right? And if you don't have the brain adaptation, you're not going to keep the biological or the physical adaptation. And that's why specificity matters.
That sound like he high. Are you high, motherfucker?
No, I'm not high.
God damn.
Motherfucker, I just did Kinstretch class. How the fuck I'm going to be high?
Motherfucker talking slow and shit. Like,
well, I'm trying to present it in a really fucking... I'm trying to present it in a way that's transferable. Fuck this motherfucker.
Physically adapt.
So basically, you need your brain and your like tissues, your muscles to adapt to it, and you can't do one without the other. Like regardless, one won't stay without the other. You need both because your brain tells you shit where to go and what to do, and your shit, your stuff, your muscles, your tissues need to be physically adapted to that.
See, that's the net I'm talking about.
In order for them to physically adapt to that, they must be commanded by the brain. The brain must be able to tell them what to do. But the brain is only going to do what that stuff is physically adapted to do. So it's this intricate dance that you have to do. And you can't do that intricate dance if you're fucking like worried about how much is my knee flexing, how much is my hip flexing, am I keeping the right spinal position, does my back foot have the adequate amount of big toe dorsiflexion for me to assume this position. Those things take away from your ability to control your ankle and utilize your ankle or ask for permission for it to go further in the dorsiflexion from your brain.
See, we just needed to get to like help Nat realize that there was an adversary out there. Like there's actually somebody out there right now who's either listening or is being stupid, and like he actually needs to like bring some level of hostility, towards this activity, like towards this.
It's funny, right? Because Rich be like, yo, man, you gotta, like, when we be, like, sometimes when we go to places and shit, like, I can see it before we walk in. He's trying to figure out how to tell me not to cuss, right? He's like, how do I tell this motherfucker don't cuss so goddamn much when we get in there? And now he's like, hey, man, now you cuss as much as you want. Be yourself. Ain't this a bitch, motherfucker? It's 4th of July. I guess I'm free now, right? Independence Day. Fuck.
Freedom ain't free. That's a good point, actually. Damn, like I feel like
Freedom ain't free?
Freedom ain't free.
Rock it off. Go.
Man, this motherfucker's out there talking about free gains. Free gains. Yo, like he don't listen to hip hop. Freedom ain't free, man. Like that statement's been around for a long time. Freedom ain't free. Freedom comes with responsibility, right? We talk about that. Like this, for those of you who don't know, like when we talk about mobility, we're talking about movement, we're talking about human, like physiology. We're talking about everything conceptually as well. So as we speak to our Kinstretch classes, for example, and we're talking about like applying these concepts are applied not just to yourself, but they're intrinsically, but they're also applied extrinsically to the world that in the environment that we reside in. And so when we talk about things and when we say something like freedom ain't free, that's twofold, right? Like we're talking about like within our body, the freedom to move is not something that we just get for free. It's something we actually have to work for to obtain. And I think that same thing applies to whatever it is we're trying to get in life. Like nothing really comes for free. And nothing worth having really comes for free. And we have to continually work to create that space and earn that space and earn the right to be in a space, right? You don't just go into a job and be like, well, I'm here now. Like I don't have to do nothing. I'm here. I got the job. It's the same like in sports, in professional sports. You play basketball, you play football. Like you, on a daily basis, you have to prove your value. You have to prove your worth. And I think the same applies to our body, right? Your shoulder just doesn't like, oh, my shoulder. The shoulder just does what shoulders do. No, your shoulder has to constantly prove its worth and its value. What does a shoulder need to do? It needs to reach back here in the back of the car and get some shit. Well, like if you never go back there and you never do that, then how does your brain know that it's capable of doing that? It does not.
How did you get good at it?
Yeah. You can't get good at things that you don't do specifically. And if you're trying to start the conversation of specificity on a dynamic movement level, you've missed so many layers of specificity. Like I don't understand. It's like a joke, right? Like when people are like like, oh, I need to squat, so I need to do the specific squat. Motherfucker, like if your ankle doesn't specifically fucking dorsiflex, then you can't specifically squat.
You're not gonna do it squatting. I wanted to jump in on that for a second before I forget, because nothing is free, but we were given all of the potential when we were born. The second we were born, though, the second you're born, you're traveling towards death, and you can think of like having all of it in the beginning, and each second that you exist or are alive, you lose some of that stuff that you were given, and we're continually losing that, no matter what we do, unless we take action to mitigate that. And because the nature of that is disorganization, you need to be specific about how you try to preserve what you were given. Because if you're not, then you will continue to work within what that chaos or that disorganization has forced you into. In order to gain freedom, you must fight for it. And in the same way that you're talking about, like conceptually, societally, culturally, in our bodies, it's like we must fight for freedom. If you want physical freedom, you're not going to get it just by sitting on the couch and watching TV or picking a handful of exercises and trying to get good at those.
Those exercises
Because
were manufactured as well. Like they're not.
right, so this think about this for a second. You're giving the fucking your metric of what is health is a handful of fucking exercises that somebody fucking made up and told you how it's supposed to look. So if your measure of health is those exercises, that's not a measure of health. That's a measure of like how well can you parrot these exercises? How well can you adapt to something somebody else told you was important?
That's interesting because like when we talk about exercises, like we literally do exercises like we have to understand the intention behind the exercises, right? If you are trying to do a bench press, like that's just because you want to do a bench press. Like I don't like it. It does it have carryover into some aspects of your life? Sure, but like most of the reason that things like bench presses were even created was to get hypertrophy of the of the pectoral muscles, right? Like and have like a large broad chest. The same thing goes for squatting with a bar on your back, any of those sorts of things. You're trying to create absolute strength and power um, from leg drive, all those sorts of things. And so, like, yes, they have carryover into other things, right? They form like a baseline for some more specific things that you need to do. Like just because you have a heavy squat doesn't mean that you are going to be the best 100-meter runner. You still have to train the specific 100-meter run and learn the running technique and work on all those things to develop specifically that talent and enhance that talent.
And the systems that support that.
Right. So, I think when we decide that we're going to choose like 5 or 6 exercises and be like, okay, you're good at that. That makes you a good human. Like, no, that's bullshit. It does not. Like, it makes you good at those things that you want to do or that you're trying to do, but it doesn't make you a good, like, human being as far as like ability um, to do the things that you want to do. Um,
Can we go back to the free gains thing for 1 second? So this is my thing because it's irritating to me when I hear people talk about what we do and they don't explain their argument against our thought process. They explain it based on their perception of what we do. And so if you're going to say that, oh, if I do this in my training, I adjust some training that I'm already doing and then I got this carryover, like one, there's no specific way that you can attribute that to that, right? Because it wasn't specific. Like in your mind, you made something you were doing more specific to that. And I would argue that that's not free because you had to make that adjustment. You had to think about that adjustment. And your brain doesn't get better at doing other shit by doing other shit. You have to do the shit that you want to get good at. That's why training the parts that make all those things possible is the greatest carryover.
That's real talk. And then, like, I think methodology and the way in which you approach training is also important. I think for the most part, like, general public people go out and they just start a training program, right? They just doing, oh, somebody told me I should do this, I should do that, I should do this.
And South Magazine said this is the best exercise in the world.
Right. Like all those magazines and Men's Health and Shape and all those different things are telling you like this is the exercise for that. This is the exercise for this. But
And all of the bodies that they have on those pages all look the same.
and are airbrushed. But then like as you start to think about I kind of lost my train of thought for a second, but if you kind of think about like creating a methodology or understanding what it is you're supposed to be doing, I think that the fatal flaw or the mistake that we often make with regards to everything that's out there is there's generally, for the most part, no assessment component. And so there's no way of determining a baseline to start with. Like, not only do we not give people a way of self-assessing themselves, but like most of the time, trainers have some garbage ass assessment that they're using that doesn't really give you the information that we're really looking for, right?
Or any real information to make real training decisions from outside of, can you fit this pattern that I'm asking you to do that I think looks this way or should look this way?
Right. So it becomes about the pattern, the skill, the thing.
It becomes your perception of what that movement should look like.
Right.
And everybody is different. Everybody's history is different. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's anatomy is different. Everybody's sort of stress strain curves within each tissue, they're all fucking different.
Right. And like that leads down a whole path of like trauma, right? Like if you played football, you have a certain degree of trauma like you may not even be aware of, right? Because it's a collision sport. So there's collisions that happen all the time, and like the way your body adapts to those collisions, you're not necessarily certain like how that happens. Like something happened in the middle of the game.
How could you be?
Yeah, something happened in the middle of the game, and like you might feel something for a second, but then your adrenaline's pumping, and like you make the immediate, like your brain makes the immediate decision to like utilize some other path or mechanism to still achieve the most out of what you're trying to accomplish, right? And so you start building a new strategy for operation, and then you just kind of keep going on, right? And then like 4 weeks down the line, suddenly some injury happens, and everybody goes, well, it was because of this specific moment right here, he did this or did that. And it's like, we don't actually know that unless it was like a direct, blunt trauma that created the thing.
I would even argue that even in that case, given like the how that stuff was based on previous history, could have had a role in that.
Could have, right? Like your ACL, ACL injury, especially if you were untouched, like an untouched ACL injury.
Yeah, non-contact.
Yeah,
exactly.
Or
that's what I'm saying.
Like if you look at like even when we go back, like Kevin Durant becomes like a thing for me because for months and months, like years actually, because it was like even when he was in OKC, people were like, oh, he's got tight calves. He's dealing with tight calves. Like he's got tight calves. Like, well, what was being done about that? And then how
foam rolling.
How were you changing? Like if so, let's just break this down. If you have quote unquote tight calves, we're just going to say that Kevin Durant's calves didn't function like a calf is designed to function, right? So if that's the feeling he's getting, and that's the feedback people are getting after assessing him, he doesn't have calves that function like a calf should function. So what does that mean about his strategies and movement patterns for achieving outcomes, the outcomes that he achieves on a regular basis? And we know that like those sorts of things are only a matter of time, especially when you're playing at that high level. The number of volume of games, the things that people are doing, like it's inevitable. And I honestly question like what has his recovery been like? Because I know our colleague, he ruptured his Achilles.
Yep.
Like 2 or 3 weeks after Kevin Durant, and he's already squatting 400 pounds, deadlifting, like
jumping,
jumping,
sprinting,
sprinting,
change of direction.
doing all types of stuff. And he like basically he's on the same timeline, and he does not feel
But
it.
so I think just as a responsibility thing, like we do realize, like from the volume of information we've been reading about like tissue adaptation and stuff, we know that, or we have to assume that it's not completely accepted in his brain as his Achilles. Like we know we're still far out from that, so we have progressively paid attention to these things and and quantified everything that we could in terms of like progressively adding them up, so that we didn't just start like randomly jumping and randomly front squatting. Like
Right.
we progressed every single portion to try to be respectful of the what we know about rates of like adaptation for like tissue and brain stuff.
Right. So, I mean, when we say all this and we go back to the whole, assessing and understanding the body in the first place, if you are a human that is just starting out on a fitness journey and you walked into whatever facility you walked into, whether it be a CrossFit or whatever type of facility you walked into, you had for the most part, you probably had no self-assessment of like where you currently at, like where are you at right now, like how does all the stuff in your body function? And if you don't have that to begin with, how do you know how to proceed? If we don't give you like, we're basically saying like, here's a piece of paper and we're going to place you in the middle of the Amazon, and there's no landmarks on any of this. So like there's nothing here. It's just a bunch of trees on the paper. Figure your way out. Like that's literally what's being told to you right there, is like, get out of the Amazon the best way you can. And that's that's got to be like
That's
the
not okay.
stupidest thing ever, right? Like give me some landmarks, give me some points, give me some strategies for how I need to get from point A to point B. You can't get to point B if you don't know where you are in the first place as far as point A.
So if you walk into any type of gym, exercise class, or anything like that, it's clear to you. They're like, okay, we're going to do these movements because it's good for your glutes and your abs or whatever, right? Or if you're in CrossFit, like, hey, this is the WOD of the day. And everybody has told you what the shit should look like and what it's supposedly doing. But nobody checked or asked you if your body was ready to do that, or if the parts of your body can do the things that these exercises want you to do. Require.
Yeah.
Because I think the point I was trying to make in one of my like recent posts is like these things, like, oh, this is for my glutes, this is for my quads, this is for my whatever, insert body part. Those aren't the things you get. Those aren't just the things you train. Those are the things that are required to get that adaptation. So if you want to squat, your knees got to be able to bend a certain amount, your hips have to flex a certain amount, and your ankles have to move a certain amount, and your spine needs to be controlled in order for you to work your glutes or quads. Because if one of those things doesn't happen, you're not doing what the exercise is supposed to do. So to Rich's point, in terms of like go from point A to point B, if you don't know what point A is, how do you know at which direction you should approach point B?
Right. It's funny because, like, I'll be the first one to admit, like, and a lot of people pretend as though they've been the coach or the trainer that they've been their whole life, and that's not true. Like, if I looked at the guy, 20 years ago, who first started working with people, I might have tried to have somebody just do a lunge, right? Like, just do this lunge, and I'd look at it and be like,
We've all done that shit.
I'd be looking at it like, oh shit, what kind of lunge is that, right? Yeah. And then instead of like figuring out like, well, what's actually going on there, instead of that, you say, let's try to make this thing look better. Right. Like instead of figuring out like all those things that Nat just said, like, can you control your spine? Can you control your hips without all these other complex things going on? Can you dorsiflex? Like, instead of all of that, we say, okay, here, take these dowels, and we're still going to try to get you to do these movements, until they look the way we want them to look. And then, it's like if your objective is to target certain tissues, like if your objective to say like this lunge targets this tissue, how do you know that tissue is receiving the adaptation that you're trying to get it to receive if you're simply having someone just mimic the movement, right? You haven't actually broken it down and said, like, can I get this person to even communicate with that tissue, like specifically? Can they contract that tissue? If they can't contract that tissue, then they're most likely not using that tissue. So even though the movement might look better, like they might be using other stuff to
They
achieve that
found a
movement.
compensation.
They found a way to use it.
Yeah, humans will try to complete the task that they're given, and especially in terms of movement, it'll happen. And it might look the way somebody told you it was supposed to look, but that doesn't mean what was supposed to the thing that we wanted to happen happened. And I always wanted to touch on this for a second. Like Rich just said, he's been 20 years ago, so he's like, experience is important, especially if you're continually trying to prove yourself wrong. So I haven't been training that as long as him, but it should tell you something that if somebody who's been in the industry for 20 years and has a fancy college degree from like an expensive ass
Here this
school,
motherfucker goes.
so like that motherfucker should know something, right? But you've been training for 5 or 6 years doing the same shit, and you're quick to argue that point. If nothing else, you should give 20 years of experience the respect it deserves, and take a second to think about it. Like, what is he getting out of trying to lie to you about that? Like, what's the motivation behind lying about that? Or you could be like, oh, he just doesn't get it. So your 6 years of experience overrides his 20 years of experience and education and the prerequisite university degree that he has. I that's just I mean, I don't know, that doesn't
And
sound right to me.
and honestly, like, that stuff. Like, I think it's interesting because, like, let's keep it 100. Most of the reason why I mean, obviously I have a degree, but I'm the first in my family to have one, and to go to college. But let's be clear, you know, like in the '80s, um, the Cosby Show and Different World was all about trying to get more black folks, to start looking at higher education as a means out of where we are. Little did we know that it would be just more of a financial anchor for a lot of people in general. But at the same time, this is having a degree does not necessarily make one better or worse than the next coach or trainer, because everyone has ample opportunity to go out there and do the study and do the research and and find mentors and find education. Like Nat's a clear example of that, of getting information and getting education and understanding stuff and doing the work that it actually takes to become a better coach and trainer in a shorter period of time. Like learning from people who took longer or who have went through certain things, and just being like, I don't need to go that path or do those things. Like I can get there faster if I just go, okay, that's a smart idea. Let me take that bit of information.
That's why we read books,
I
right?
don't need to. Yeah, I don't need to do all that other stuff that they're telling me I need to do to go through this path. And also, like a degree and an education is fixed in time, right? So what I learned in physiology, or in my physiological science program, which they've changed the name of, I found out from the therapist that works here in our facility, because she has the same major, same degree as I have. Only, which is funny. But she graduated in like 2000, I don't know, 2012, 2000. Like I already been out of college for 12 years. And like what she learned in that program was a lot different than what I learned in that program. So my degree is stuck in time, right? Like it's stuck in that period of 1996 through 2000. And what we knew about science in 1996 through 2000 is vastly different than what we know between 2010 and 2020. Like our understanding of human physiology, our understanding of human adaptation, our understanding of human evolution, all of these different physics, all of this stuff is continually changing. And so if you're not continuing to like evolve and change along with it, then you're missing out on some parts. So yes, give people who have been in the space some degree of respect for actually being in the space. But I would argue a little bit more about like you should always keep your radar up and keep your
Oh,
and
no doubt, absolutely.
and understand it. Just because you've been there doesn't mean that you've moved along with the times. Because if you're still doing the same
Right.
thing you were doing 20 years ago, if you're still doing exactly the same thing you're doing 20 years ago, then that's not helping people. It's not.
True that.
Uh,
True that.
but I mean, I think like if like our field is a science-based field, right? And I think
I
we
would hope so.
so
I would
many,
hope so.
so many people want to ignore that aspect of it, right? Like, I mean, I think
Oh, I work out a lot, so I should be a trainer.
I mean, if you like, I hear people throw around the word theory and like all these. I'm just like, man, like when was the last time was it high school that you that you learned this like
This is my
scientific
fucking
method?
thing. I fucking hate it when people don't use science, but they want to use scientific terms because they think it makes them fucking sound smart. And when in reality, everybody knows you're fucking full of shit. It really fucking bugs me.
I mean, so we tell people do cars every day, right? And you have people that will argue with us to the end of eternity about it's a waste of time, it's this and that. But then at the same time, you'll hear some jackass be like, well, all they need to do is move more. Motherfucker, what do you think cars are?
You can only move where you can move anyway, so.
God. Like, what do you actually think cars are? It's moving more at the joint level through their fullest range.
Goddamn right. It doesn't make any fucking sense for you to be like, move more, but don't do cars. Because, like, okay, if you're telling somebody to move more, now you're deciding how they should and shouldn't move or what they should or shouldn't do. And if you're going to do that, wouldn't you want to be as safe as possible and be like, let's be specific about what we're doing? Let's make sure that we're not sending a bunch of noise with the signal because I want you to move. Because my purpose or intention of you to move more is for you to feel better and be better and have a greater amount of freedom in what you're doing.
And just like all freedom isn't free, all money ain't good money, and all
Exactly.
movement ain't good movement. So,
Exactly.
like, man, I learned that on the table with the domino table, man. Like, shit. Y'all,
I played pickup six.
for y'all that don't know, see, we changing the whole apparatus and game at the way we discussing this whole thing because, like, if you ain't never played dominoes with no black folks, you don't know what the fuck we talking about. If you sitting at the table and you looking at these domino pieces and you like, oh, I could get 25 points right here on this thing, and your uncle already told you. He told you at some point in time, all money ain't good money. And your dumbass still play that 25. And your partner sitting across the table looking at you like, you stupid motherfucker, the big 5 is still out there.
You know what you about to set it up for?
A 30 for the other team.
So you just lost $5 and wasted all your money in doing so.
Oh, my God. So just like all freedom ain't free, or freedom isn't free, all money isn't good money, and all movement is not good movement. So, for people out there saying, well, just go out and climb some shit and go out and crawl and do this and do that. And it's like, well, if you got poor quality movement in general, then it's not good. If my wrist does not do what a wrist is designed to do, and then I have somebody go out and do animal flow for hours on end, guess what my wrist is going to feel like? It's going to feel like
Shitty.
shit. You know, if my shoulder doesn't do what a shoulder is designed to do, and I keep jamming it into a closed chain rotation while I'm doing a crab reach or a under switch, go look those up if you don't know what those are. Just go to YouTube and look those up. And this is not shitting on Animal Flow. I love Animal Flow. I think it's very useful, and I wouldn't be certified with it if I didn't believe in it.
See how we slid that in there?
I appreciate the whole community, but I do approach it differently than a lot of coaches do, and I think we find it useful. If you're swinging a mace and your shoulder's not designed, your shoulder doesn't do what a shoulder's designed to do, guess what? You're gonna be stealing it from somewhere. It's not gonna be a good movement for you. It's not gonna be a nourishing movement for you. Movement becomes nourishing when the movement quality is good, not just the quality. The quality of it is good.
I want to go back to the domino thing for a second.
Motherfucker.
So when I first started learning to play dominoes with black folks, as Rich said, and like all joking aside, so first of all, I think for us to get over this racist shit, we need to dispassionately discuss and like stop being obsessed with race in the first place. But there is a difference though, and like don't take that the wrong way, because like we're fucking a long centuries away from that. But when you play dominoes with the black community and the Asian community and the Southern American community, it's all a little bit different. And I will say, when I started learning to play dominoes with the black community, I remember one of the very first games, because there's a lot of shit talking involved.
A lot.
Like this so you've got to be running numbers.
You got to
in your
be
head.
mentally ready.
Yeah, you've got to look at the board. You've got to be reading the other people. Like, it's a lot more involved. And so throughout, my partner was this older gentleman named E. We called him E, and he was like 54. So I'm trying to keep track of all these things, and he keeps, like, every time that I play a 5, he's slamming down his domino. Right, when he plays, he slams it down. I didn't pick up the cue. Right? I didn't pick up the cue, like, yo, motherfucker, quit putting that 5 out there. Like, you heard what I called. So, like, but I'm so caught up in everything else, like, trying to read people, like, trying to keep up with the shit talking, because I love to talk shit. And I can't ever let that part go. So, like, I was probably more heavily involved in that part than anything else. But, so I kept missing the cue until finally E was like, God damn, motherfucker, you see me? I keep slamming every time you play that goddamn 5. And I was like, oh, shit. Because every time I did, they ate, right? I was like, oh, fuck. And he didn't have nowhere to go. So, anyway, Rich put up a post recently talking about shoulder pain. Remember? And then how you're talking about, like, there are those little messages or cues that you ignore.
Yep.
In Rich's mace swing example, if you've been there or if you've done any exercise and, like, something started to not feel right, but you just kind of adjusted or did a little bit less and didn't address the issue, it turned into a full-blown fucking thing where that joint or that shoulder, that it was fucked up.
Right.
Because you ignored the cues.
It just grew.
E and I lost that game because I ignored the fucking cues. Right? So this is why that stuff matters. This is why, like, just move more isn't the right answer. Because when you do that, you ignore the cues. And you disregard that there are cues to begin with.
Man, that was funny. That's just funny. Like, you know, domino games. Like, it's funny because it's like, and you're indoctrinated as a young kid, and whenever it's funny because whenever I played dominoes with non-black people or in particular white people, it's just like, what is this? What is going on?
I've never played dominoes with white people, so I can't speak to that.
What is going on? Like, what is happening here? And, like, I think, you know, people also don't, like, understand how a community, like a community or a select group of people, like, it's a norm, right? Certain things are a norm within our community, whereas you see it as violent or threatening or whatever the case is. this is this is just normal interaction and behavior.
It's culture.
Like, oh shit, let's call the cops on these people because they're getting rowdy. Like, no, this is just how we interact with each other. This is love. You know, and I think that happens with dominoes, spades, whist, like all of it. Like it's all
more dominoes than spades, I think.
But the cues are very important. You know, as I talk about, like, a lot of people within the mace community, you know, they ignore a lot of what's going on. Like, I look at videos and I see people and I don't comment. I just go on about my business, because unless somebody came to ask me specifically, like, I'm here to help, but unless you know, came specifically to me and were like, you know, I value your expertise and I value what you do, like, can you help me? Like, unless I get that, like, that, there's no reason for me to say anything to you. Go buy my shit. Go read my ebook. Tell you everything you need to know. But
the ebook is free, ain't it?
Yeah, it's free. It's out. It's a little outdated. I didn't go into too much detail, but like, if you,
it's stuck in time.
It is stuck in time. But if you read it, you at least have like a baseline of like, information. Oh shit! Like, maybe I'm doing this wrong. Like, maybe I should start questioning what I am doing. But I think, like, people aren't willing to put in the work. Like, I don't swing the mace as frequently as I used to in the past. I just don't feel like I need to, but I can pick up a mace and swing it when I feel like it.
Without a warm up.
Yeah, I don't need to keep going up in weight and going up in load. Like, that doesn't do anything for me. It's a dynamic, ballistic movement that anything can go wrong at any given time. So it's a little bit more uncontrolled than say some of the other major lifts. And it has its pros, its cons, its benefits, and whatnot when done well. But I'd much rather swing a 10, 15 pounder these days and just enjoy the fact that I'm swinging it nicely than have a heavy load.
And not have a fucking shoulder hit after the fact.
And have a shoulder that just just hurts all the time. Or an elbow. You know, like, a lot of people have, you know, elbow issues as well. And like I said, like Nat said, that post about, like, you had a thing and you didn't realize, like, you didn't pay attention to that thing. And, like, that thing might have went away, right, for a period of time. You're like, oh, that elbow thing doesn't seem to be an elbow thing anymore.
I would argue it was just hiding.
But yeah, it's just like, what are you, like, you don't necessarily know what you might be doing slightly different, you know, in the moment. Your brain knows. The idea that we have control is, I think, like, arrogant.
Are we gonna get into the free will talk or no? We're not going that deep, right?
I don't know. I mean, do we have control over our body? Like, or does our brain have control over us? Like, which one is it? Like,
I don't know. Yeah, which one?
I mean, think about it. Like, your brain protects you, right? It protects you at all costs, right? Because it's trying to survive. Like, all the stupid shit you want to do, like, sometimes you override it, right? And then what happens? You end up in some stupid situation, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when you override the thing, you knew you shouldn't have done that shit, right?
Motherfucker, you know you weren't supposed to do that shit. What's wrong with you?
Like, fear and all those things are there for a legitimate reason, right? Like, we do stupid. Like, look, if you love rock climbing, free climbing, all that sort of shit, go have at it. But when you die, or when you whatever, don't, like, I'm not shedding no fucking tears for you. You know what I mean? That shit was not a tragedy. That was a stupid ass fucking decision that you were doing. You were enjoying climbing a freaking mountain with no fucking gear, or even if you had gear. Like, understand that just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something, right? And, like, if I had to climb a fucking mountain or a rock wall or some shit to get away from a predator, like, it was life or death, like, I'm gonna do that shit, right? Or to get out of some space that I need to get back to civilization, or whatever the case is. Like, I'm trying to get somewhere, and this is the only way. Like, either you stay down there and die, or you go for it and potentially die, right? Like, that's a lot different than just being like, you know what, I enjoy climbing freaking rocks. I enjoy, like, you know, going
Scaling the face of El Cap without ropes or whatever.
like like yeah, okay, it's enjoyable because it's a thrill. It's a thrill because, like, that's your adrenaline and response. Like, that's like we are seeking thrills out of the very things
Reward systems.
that our reward systems are
This shit
all
about to get
fucked
deep.
up, right? Like, we've got too much time on our hands. We literally do.
I was
Jumping
quickly
out of a
before I
plane.
forget,
Jumping out of the plane because because that shit's fun. Motherfucker, the plane still works.
I want to know
It
what it feels like
works.
to fly.
The plane is this is a perfectly functioning plane. We have no reason to jump out. Why not put parachutes in all planes if this is the case? Because it would
You know-
save lives, wouldn't it? If we could all just jump
I
out
would-
and parachute.
I was just thinking about this. Like, our need to get that adrenaline rush probably has a lot to do from an evolutionary perspective that we are no longer where we are in the food chain.
right.
Would you buy that?
I'll buy that.
All right. And
Look, we not running from lions and tigers and shit like that no more. So we got to
That's what I'm
figure out.
saying,
We got to
though, right?
figure it out, right? We got to figure out
That's
how
what I'm
to
saying.
get that feeling.
and if so, like, I'm gonna this is just me talking out loud. Like, I'm not. This is and I think this is a good example. This is not a scientific process. As I'm thinking out loud, like, because as I've made this sort of remark or this thought, put forth this thought, my follow up is like the way that my brain tries to make the association is like, and think about this, like Cats from the Hood, they're like, I don't need to go jump out no fucking airplane
They
or go
don't.
bungee jumping, because you're dealing with a lot of that already on a
Every
day-to-day
day.
basis.
Every day.
Or if you live like in an abusive household, then you yourself are not going to be going to look for that either necessarily, right? Because you're already experiencing some of it, right? And I mean, this is just like, again, this is my brain making associations. This is not me looking at the information and then making that statement. I'm just saying, like, yeah. Oh wait, another thing, another fucking thing is, I would argue, it's our brain control. Like, it's our brain has the control, but it can only be controlled as much as your habits. So, like, our brains were created so we can move. So then that dictates that our brain controls our bodies. But our brain can only control our bodies to the extent that our bodies will cooperate.
That is also true.
And how well our bodies cooperate based largely on
Like, you
what our
can't just-
brain experiences
like,
from our bodies.
You can't just do the splits on command just because you just decided.
You
know,
can
fuck
if you
it.
do split squats. You can if you do split squats a lot.
Put weights on
Yeah,
your.
and you put a
your
weight on,
thigh.
put a kettlebell on your head, hold one hand, and balance it like this when you do it.
But I mean, it's like, we have to understand that, like, the game that we're playing with our body is not just a physiological game, but a neurological game. Like, we actually have to influence our nervous system in a lot of ways. So, like, to get back to, like, tightness and things like that, a lot of times, like I said, if your brain is not accustomed to being in a certain space, it does not want you to go there. Like, it's a protective mechanism. The mechanisms for keeping you in a space that you are most comfortable in, homeostasis, right? And so,
Why does that stretch reflex exist?
right. And so, like I said, once again, do we control the brain, or does the brain control us? Like, our brains function. Like, I think like in one of the lectures that Dr. Angelo Spina talked about, he was talking about, like, how our brain is basically inside of a freaking solid thing. Like, it has no way
Your skull.
of getting inside of our skull, which is a solid bones. Like, it has no way of obtaining information through that other than through the ways in which it has evolved to do so. So the fact that you smell something, the fact that you taste something, the fact that you hear something, the fact that you see something, the fact that you touch something with the largest organ in your body, which is your skin, those are the ways in which your brain can collect information about the outside world, the world outside of the inside of your skull, right? That's the only way it can connect that information. So you lose any of those senses, and you lose some ability to receive information and make good decisions. Now, why is it that when we tell you that if you have better joints and if you move more with better quality joints, that your collection of information regarding movement will be better? Why is it that you then tell us, no, that's not true? No, like, uh, so if that's your brain's only way of collecting information, right? That's how it collects information, through joints that function like a joint is fucking supposed to function, right? If I'm a runner, if I run, your first point of contact is your foot on the floor. Your foot hits the freaking ground, and like all of those joints in the foot are collecting information immediately. Like within, like before you can even register that your foot is doing some actual shit.
Should you tell him about the capsule?
Let's say that before another. It's been 56 minutes.
Let's just say that the capsule, the deepest layer of the joint, is the first thing to send information about movement. Can we say that?
You can say that. Yeah, you can say that.
Okay, yeah. So like, and then because that helps put context to like the examples you're giving.
And then because we wear shoes, right? Like we need shoes. Like these streets, and like I don't care what city you're in, these streets is filthy. You know, people talk about San Francisco streets. I've been to New York. Y'all streets is dirty too. Everybody's
San
streets
Francisco
is dirty.
streets is dirty as shit, though. Yes, they are. Ain't nobody contesting that. So don't be walking around in sandals in SF. That's all.
Well, I wouldn't walk around in sandals in none of these nasty ass cities.
The point of the matter is the pat.
I lived in Bangkok, y'all.
Now you really. Here you go. Here you go. This motherfucker.
See, Nat gonna get mad because he Thai, and he gonna be like, "You talking shit about Bang?" Man, look.
So as
anyway,
talking
we wear
about
shoes.
in terms of like people calling cops on people, like if you saw Rich and I walking down the street talking shit, like somebody might think we did. I love this motherfucker, but like I'll talk bad to him like all day long. So like, but communication, right? My thing about that is communication.
Put the
like
mic in front of your face.
It is in front of my face, motherfucker. What you talking about?
This motherfucker.
Because this motherfucker kissing his goddamn microphone.
Yeah, because so look, check this out.
He making out with his fucking microphone.
Check this out, y'all. Because for those of you who are on YouTube, you can see this video. You can see how this shit work, right? Watch. I'm gonna keep talking, and when I keep talking, I'm gonna keep talking, and shit keep going, and then what happens?
See, the thing about that is he has feedback in terms of what he can hear. I don't have feedback. I can only hear like what he's saying. I can't hear me. Anyways, in terms of communication, so you roll your eyes again, motherfucker. I wish a motherfucker would. I'll reach across this and stop. So if I'm walking out to you, Rich, and I'm talking shit, I know him well, and I know what points to hit, and I know what's salient in terms of shit talking. It's the same thing with your brain. Like if your brain ain't been there, it won't know what to do. So if we were walking down the street with another friend that's not as well versed in talking shit, doesn't know us as well, that person will feel left out of the conversation. Your brain and your body is like that. The parts that you use often, your brain is familiar with that. How you use those parts often, your brain is familiar with that. And if it's not, then the conversation doesn't go well.
That's true. And we put our feet in shoes, and so we lose some degree of communication about the ground below us. And
I wear Vivos. Rich always talking shit, but I wear Vivos.
And then and if you think about that, like if your foot's unable to collect the vast majority of information that it's supposed to collect, then what's the next joint? Then your ankle has to collect a little bit more than it may be. You're asking the ankle to do more than it should do as far as collect information. What happens
if you have those shoes that don't let your ankle move?
Then you got high tops on, right? So they don't let your ankle move. So now you got those casted in. So guess what joint's going to be asked to do a whole lot of collecting of information is your knee joint. Your
split squat joint.
Your knee joint was not designed to do all of that. It was not designed to make all those little bits of information and collect all that little bit of information.
And dissipate all of the force.
And dissipate all those forces. So
a lot of joints in the foot. A lot.
We say all that just to say that we should, not that you should be walking around in Jesus sandals. But you should spend a lot of time barefoot. That's the take-home message of that. We got off tangent a little bit there, but that's okay. You benefited from that Just acknowledge it and accept it. You did. Um, we we were talking about because you didn't know that. Some of you might have known that, but you didn't know that in general. At least you didn't hear it the way we told it to you.
I don't have any comment on that. I think a large part of our audience might have been a little bit hip to it, but ain't no telling.
They might have
If you're
been.
new to us, though,
They might
if
have.
you're new to us, that was news to you.
Yeah, a lot of our audience is hip to it, but like I said, they didn't hear this shit like they hearing it like this.
Yeah, because we usually don't have this vessel or this vehicle to communicate that, right?
We're having to usually speak through the
Instagram,
default
YouTube,
or the default characterization of our.
yeah.
We have to be all prim and proper and speak like this. Fuck all that. Now we're changing the game. This is changed up. So
I've been trying to change the game. Rich keep yelling at me about it.
So we need some scientific methodology, which we're saying like that's why you do
Correct.
cars every day, because not only are you moving more with that
You have a
within the
baseline.
ranges,
You have a
but
control.
you have a control and a baseline, and everybody who knows anything about scientific method knows that you need a control. And
Continual gathering of information.
yeah, if you don't have a control, then you don't have anything to base any change upon.
Where's your disconfirmation exist without the control? Phenomenology. Oh wait, never mind. Stop that shit. So quickly, phenomenology is like when you study the phenomena of a thing and you take out like the thing that's experiencing it because you think that you're removing bias by exploring that experience. However, that's not appropriate when you're dealing with adaptation of a human system. I hope that makes a bunch of sense. Does it?
Phenomenology would be great if
It's
we
also
were
a philosophical
talking
thing.
about, like, yeah, and okay, there was a point in time when people thought the Earth was flat.
Wait, the Earth's not flat? Bro, ain't no way this Earth is round. We would have fell off. Somebody would have fell off.
And there was a point in time.
I'm joking. I'm fucking joking. Shit.
And there was a point in time, where people thought like certain constellations were like Zeus on his fucking chair.
Oh, yeah,
Thunder.
Orion and
Thunder was like Zeus being thunder and lightning was Zeus being mad, and tidal waves and shit was Poseidon. Like the fact that we still have human beings that think in this way, despite all of the information that we currently have, is beyond, like, don't comment on my Instagram posts or our YouTube posts, because we're most likely to just probably like curse you out or something, because there's no conversation to really be had anymore regarding all this.
So I would say that there's scientific proof that the Earth is not flat, because if it was, there would be cats at the edge trying to knock shit off. What? Right? So am I wrong? What the fuck?
But if you go up in the airplane, and you take your camera and you take like a picture or like a video, you can see.
No,
that's
just a conspiracy, bro. They did that shit to make people think that shit. That's just not
you
real.
can see that it's flat though. Like if you look,
Yeah, this is what I'm telling you, bro. Like that's real shit. But the Earth people, like the round Earthers, they tried to take that picture from space. It showed we were all one and we were like a big sphere. That shit ain't real. That shit no. That's why you saw the big cats at the edge of the thing on the flat picture.
Yo, so
I do not believe the Earth is flat. I'm just fucking around. Don't nobody go and say like, "Oh, Nat says the Earth is flat." I'm completely just fucking around.
Nat turned into Kyrie Irving real quick. He just
Okay,
man.
take home message.
So this
Scientific process.
But this is why we do. Joint specific work, right?
Right,
Like we
correct.
do joint specific work because specificity dictates that we do that we influence the capsule, that we influence the space, that we continually make space in our joints, or continue to maintain space, I should say, in our joints, right?
Continue to be familiar with it.
Continue to be familiar with it. Continue to adapt that tissue, right? Because we spend so much time in linear movements, right? Because like we said earlier, people have been conditioned to believe that like, oh, if like I need to do bench press, like I want to have a bigger chest, or then do military press, and then do rows, and then do like your humerus is still like has to move. Like if you look at the bone, it still has to move in a circular fashion. Your squat, it still has to move in a
All
rotational.
movements contain rotation
Yeah, all movements contain rotational um, uh,
components.
components of it, right? And so, um, just because you're doing these movements that look specifically linear does not mean that it's a linear thing. And then on top of that, you're still not training the rotational aspects of it just by doing the linear stuff. You're training that specific movement, that specific thing, but you're not actually training all of the spaces in between. And so,
And unless you've actually checked if you possess the adequate rotation, how would you know just doing linear stuff,
right,
right?
yeah,
Are you gonna like try to do military press? Like, oh, you know what? My internal rotation might be kind of limited.
yeah,
Like,
and
who's ever said that?
and those things, like, so we end up with these problematic issues with our joints over time because we keep hammering away at specific directionalities of the joint when our joint was
Trying to make
designed.
it look exactly the same every time.
Yeah, I mean, like we want our chest to look a certain way, but it's like, yeah, that's nice, and that will adapt to that. That tissue will adapt to that, but at the same time, when you've created this directional, you've kind of created a directional imbalance to some degree because you've influenced the tissue in that way to do that thing, but you haven't influence the tissues of that joint to do what that joint was designed to optimally do as a whole, like to do all of the things that it is designed to do.
If you think about when you're sledding, right? Let's say it's a sled, like the sled goes in the snow, like the sled that comes behind it is gonna go in that same track, right?
Yeah.
And like that's the way it happens. Like you keep going down that track until you groove this really deep track with that, and it's like it might be like off to here to the side just a little bit, but it's generally the same track, and everybody's traveling down the same track. Every time you go down that same track, and none of the other snow gets touched,
Right.
right? So if you can think about when you're training and doing named exercises, that you're doing that, and you need to be like joint training is to me is like getting fresh snow everywhere, right? You're like when you come up to the hill, if there's no track, you can go down any part of that
Right.
hill,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you'll have a better time exploring whatever track you want as opposed to going down the one that everybody else is going down.
Right. And so, I mean, I think that's generally why we believe in joint specific training, not just for that reason, but overall, like a healthy joint, a joint that's designed to do what it, or a joint that does what it's designed to do, is just going to be a better joint in general, and it's we all want to feel better, we all want to feel good in the things that we do, and that's the whole reason behind us saying, hey, let's upgrade your shit. And that's the whole catalyst behind our programs, which we have at theupgradeguys.com. So just kind of starting to build out and get people more familiar with the basics of training. You can get the foundations for mobility training, which is just kind of an introduction. You can test out a 15-minute mobility snack and a Kinstretch class. Yeah, and it's free. So, and then from there you can decide, to join us more. We have private, Facebook group where we do Q&A and we talk a little bit more and we give some specific outputs, and we'll be adding some more stuff soon with some more specific monthly activities to kind of help guide your practice in more specific areas, which is going to be really cool as well. So thank you guys for
yeah, we putting it together. So like if you're listening, this is sort of, we're building it out, and we have a vision in mind in terms of like how much return on investment you get, because we're just going to keep adding to the information, but like the way we do things is going to be largely influenced by our community, because we're making this for the community, and you're going to be spending time training anyway. So if you're spending time training, we want to make sure that you get the greatest ROI, and that you have an understanding of what's appropriate for your body. you can find those things in our membership. You can also find things in our membership to make you a monster, right? Because these are tools, and we give you the thought process behind how to utilize the tools. We don't just want to give you stuff and say do this. That exists, but we also want you to have some autonomy in making your decisions and gaining your own physical freedom.
So, thank you all for listening today on the first episode of the Upgrade Your Shit podcast. We're looking forward to having some great guests on here. So if you are, if you thought this was cool, you just wait. We've got some people lined up that we're going to have on the show that I think you'll really, really enjoy. We'll get a chance to hear some different thought processes, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun. So
a lot of fun.
So join us next time. Thanks for listening.
Upgrade your shit. Upgrade your shit.